I was 11 when I first heard The Who. That was it for me. They were my band. You know, we didn't have as many gangs back then. We had bands that we were fierce fans of, and The Who was my band of choice. I also liked other bands. I liked Jimi Hendrix, but it was The Who, The Who, The Who. The first time, to be totally honest, was since I got boned out of tickets on several other occasions, which I'll never forgive certain people for, was at the Fillmore East in 1969 in May, and they were just incredible. I have never seen anything like it. I'd never seen anything like it before, and nor have I seen anything like it since. They, Pete had been arrested the night before. A plainclothes policeman had gone on stage of the Fillmore to warn everybody that there was a fire next door. Pete thought he was a heckler and kicked him in the balls and sent him off stage. He was arrested, spent the night in jail. I guess he was kind of cranky. My brother and I had front row seats. It was the first time we were ever going to see him, literally front row. First thing the usher said to us, came by and said, "Whatever you do, don't touch the stage." Never seen anything like it in my life, as I said. I mean, Pete Townsend, I don't even think he was on the ground for more than, a moment, just totally airborne, these acrobatics and the windmills, and he's just totally fierce. Keith Moon's drumming, like a machine, this human dynamo. Roger, that was really the beginning of his kind of rock god phase with the fringe jacket and, twirling the microphone and all that. And John, just standing there, really solid, the ox playing the bass. And then at the end, they started tearing everything up, and I did get a Keith Moon drumstick that night. But never, the performance, the end, the energy, the impact it had on me, I'm telling you, we walked out of the Fillmore. We wanted to get run over by the Second Avenue bus. We swore we'd just die and go straight to rock and roll Valhalla. I suppose hearing this now, one would think this couldn't really be true. This is just, his version now. This is revisionism, whatever. But I had this desire. I was such a big Who fan. I wanted everybody to share in the experience of seeing the Who. As I said, back then, instead of being in a gang, you had your favorite band. You were always fighting for your favorite band. Getting into rows on the school bus, whatever. My band's better than your band, whatever. And I thought, if I could make a film about them, it, maybe could prove this point, or at least preserve what they were doing, forever, I guess. I mean, there weren't a lot of rock and roll movies. Obviously, I'd seen things like Monterey Pop, which is a great movie, great sequence of The Who, doing my generation. I just wanted to, I guess, sum up this experience and share this experience and preserve this experience forever of The Who, being there, seeing them. I thought, besides the visceral thing of what they were about as a band live, that energy, it was what they represented. I mean, they had contributed so much to rock and roll, even then, in terms of style. I always liked their flamboyance, their look. It was always changing. They were mods, and then the pop art thing, the Union Jack jacket, and then the dandy stuff with the sequins and the ruffles and all that, and the gear on stage, the stacks of amplifiers, the mountains of amplifiers, and Keith's double kick drums, and huge set, and of course the pyro, the smoke bombs, flash pots, and the ritual of smashing all the instruments. They just were extremely theatrical. And their musical contributions, the mini opera, Tommy, the rock opera, all that stuff. Pete is probably one of the original feedback merchants. Just and Pete is the most articulate spokesman for rock and roll. I suppose somebody had to do it, and he did it, and to me, if there was ever going to be a movie about a band, the quintessential rock and roll band was The Who. I can't honestly recall a specific moment where I first kind of broached this inane idea. I just remember just asking, begging, pleading so many times. And in spite of what it says on the website for the kids were all right, I wasn't crying. I didn't cry and say, Pete, break in tears. And he said, okay. It was a good story, though.
So how'd you get it? How'd you get it?
I don't know. As I said, I wore them down. I was a tremendous, pain in the ass, I suppose. I just wouldn't give up. I had this notion about doing this film about the I would not give up. I know it sounds ridiculous. It was as simple as that, as complicated as everything became and what needed to be put into place for it actually to happen. The notion of doing it, once I had that, I just kept asking. I was young and naive, and I didn't know enough to realize it was impossible. I mean, now I would never even think about doing something like that. It was ridiculous. In the continuing saga of getting this film made, the Odyssey, a large part of it was trying to find enough footage to make the film. If we got the go-ahead, I wanted to make sure that the actual pieces were there, that they existed, that they hadn't been erased, whatever, that we could license them. I'm sure it wasn't even that complicated at that point. It was just finding them, making sure they existed. And that was to convince myself that there was enough material. And then, of course, I wanted to convince The Who that it was worthwhile making this film. And I thought the best way to do that was, seeing is believing and all that, was the footage I had found I thought was so incredible, so entertaining, that if I put together this little promotional reel for them, that, maybe they would see it my way. They'd see what I was seeing, And I put together this 17-minute promotional reel. The Smothers Brothers, and I think some of the Shindig material, and odds and sods, some bits and pieces of old promo films, etc. And I managed during one of their tours to get them in a screening room in New York, show them this 17-minute promo piece that I had done with Eddie Rothkowitz, Eddie the editor. And, got them in this editing, got them into this screening room, showed them the 17 minutes, and the reception was absolutely riotous. I mean, they were screaming and laughing and, slamming each other all over the place. And Roger's wife, Heather, knocked this coffee table over, and the chairs were going over, and the drinks were spilled, and it was absolute mayhem. And I just thought, well, maybe we have something here. I know that my ability to actually shoulder the responsibilities of making the film was probably brought up on rare occasion. But Pete told me early on that if I could put up with all the craziness that I would encounter in order to get this project made, that he would back me. I mean, I think he wanted to see me go through this process and do it on my own, convince the other members of the band, find enough footage to make it real, raise the money if need be, and keep it all together. But he said he would back me. And he did. He would always back me. He was there. He was my mentor. You know, he definitely was the person. He was the man behind the curtain. He was the wizard, you know. I had this letter that Pete wrote to me. It was right before I finally went to England to do the film. Um, Basically, in the letter, he said, I know you love and idolize The Who, but there's a great danger that if you get to know us, you will hate us. You will loathe us when you see what we really are. I think, you know, he had a good idea of the experience I was going to go through, the baptism in fire. I think anybody that became involved with The Who, I wouldn't say I was necessarily intimately involved. I mean, I did work on this for at least 4 years in their camp, but there was, I think, some kind of, you know, ritualistic torture, some kind of rituals they put people through to see, you know, if you had the gumption to like stick it out, you know, I suppose some kind of hazing, whatever. When I went out to raise the money, again, you know, I was, you know, had absolutely no track record of any sort. I'd never made a film. I'd never made a music video. There weren't music videos then. I had no show reel. I had no agent. I had no representation. I had nothing except, you know, this burning desire to do this film. But I guess, you know, I had, you know, whatever, what do they call now? Passion, the most overused word in this business. I guess I had this passion that people felt to do this film. It was my crusade, you know. And I would go to people. I'd find, oh, this guy puts up money for, you know, odd films or whatever, and I'd go see him. Some of them shall remain nameless. But I went to see one guy who looked at me across, you know, his desk, his big desk, you know, he's probably smoking a cigar and all that kind of cliche stuff. And he looked at me, he said, you want me to give you money? You want me to give you a couple $1 million to make a movie about a rock band? You're a piece of dirt. I would sweep under my carpet. I remember that. Eddie, the editor, and myself moved to Soho, where we then shared a floor of editing suites with Thelma Schoonmaker, who was editing Wings Over America, Paul McCartney's documentary. And I remember fondly, Paul would come up, you know, he's supposed to be screening the Wings film, and of course he'd come over to our cutting room instead and sit there and carry on with us and watch. He loved The Who. He's a huge Who fan. He loved sitting there watching this stuff. And of course, you know, here I am. I mean, you know, I'm this, you know, guy from Queens, and you know, I'm a rock and roll fan. And here's Paul McCartney sitting in my editing room watching this. I mean, it was incredible. But there were a lot of incredible experiences making this film. I mean, the characters, you know, if one was a rock and roll fan, which I was, I mean, the people I met, the legendary people, I mean, I'd go out at night, go around the pub, the Ship on Wardour Street, kind of a famous music biz pub, and it would be Pete Townsend and Malcolm McLaren and Kit Lambert and me, and Malcolm be trying to get, you know, ideas off of, you know, Pete and Kit, how to, you know, produce like a controversial band, you know, later, you know, of course he was doing the Sex Pistols. Moments like that, meeting Dave Clark, who, you know, from the Dave Clark 5, you know, to get the Ready, Steady, Go footage. Nick Rogue, who had made Performance, my favorite rock and roll movie, I guess, of that time, who had been a director of photography before he became a director. I actually asked him to be the DP. The kids are all right. I guess I had such cheek, or I was so stupid. I asked him if he'd be the director of photography for my movie. You know, he's this huge director. You know, it was hilarious. I didn't know better. And the people out there then, it was in the middle of the punk movement. So, you know, hanging out with, you know, Johnny Lydon and Sid Vicious. Sid still owes me £5, actually. But filmmakers, I mean, the first screening I ever had of The Kids Are All Right, of the first answer print, it was Marty Scorsese and Ringo and Patty Harrison, who, you know, Eric Clapton wrote Layla about. You know, it was just amazing things for a rock and roll fan to be in all of that. You know, have Ringo come and interview Keith Moon for you. It was a unique experience. Back then, I suppose I would never want to make any kind of, you know, excuses for the film, but back in the day, it was very different in terms of putting a film like this together. When we did the research, there was no internet to help out. You know, it was either word of mouth or just calling and writing letters. There was no email. In terms of the band maybe preserving something for posterity, forget it. I think Pete had a couple of things. I remember we went to his house, a horrible story. I'm wondering how much of this I should tell even. But we were supposed to go to Pete's house, and we were supposed to and pick up some pieces in his kind of studio on the Thames, you know, on the embankment in the Thames. And he was out on his boat. Back then he used to like to go on his boat. And I got to the house and, you know, Pete's wife, Karen, said, oh, Pete was expecting you, but he's stuck on his boat. But he said, wait around. And man, so we thought, oh, we'll stick around. We'll retire to the pub. So we have a few, more than a few, waiting for Pete. Boat comes in. We're a little anxious because actually we had to make a flight. We had to go back to America with the bits and pieces that we had gotten. We were going to put together our reel, our promo reel, you know, our show reel. It was really a show reel. I needed these clips desperately from Pete. Anyway, he finally shows up. We've had a few at the pub. And he says, oh, Jeff, hey, Eddie, here, I got to go in the house, you know, check in with the wife or whatever. Here's my keys. It's in the studio on this shelf, whatever. And I give him the keys to the kingdom or whatever. And I'll never forget there was this keychain with this thing with Mayor Baba, you know, Pete's guru on it, this like plexiglass thing or whatever, and this keychain. And I go to his room, I'm very nervous and so on and so forth. And go and I start to open the doors and I drop this thing and it just breaks and there's Mayor Baba popping out, you know, and I'm just, oh my God, I'm never going to get to make this film. I mean, I just ruined Pete's treasured thing. Oh my God, you know, I just wanted some clips. And, you know, I went, pick it up and thank God, I think it had just kind of like popped out. I put it together. I'm hoping he won't notice. Sorry, Pete, if you had ever noticed. I give it back to him. We hardly get these pieces. We're now very late for the plane. This is the part I'm not sure I can tell. You have to remember, I don't even have a work permit yet, and this is my dream to do this film, you know, the dream that turned into a nightmare. But we're racing to get to the airport, you know, and there's a roadblock. There'd been a football match in Pete's neck of the woods, and there's a roadblock. There's these cops and everything, and we'd had a few, and I'll leave it at that. Maybe there was some contraband in the car. I don't know. But I say to Eddie, what are we going to do? It's a roadblock. You know, he goes, Jeff, we're not stopping. And he floored it. And we went right through this roadblock. And unfortunately, it was kind of in the English countryside. They probably had bicycles and whistles, and they were like chasing after us. And we ditched the car at the long-term parking lot at Heathrow and got on the plane. I thought, if I get caught, I'll never make this movie. I wonder if they ever found the car. His hearing, I think, you know, his hearing at that time, he was starting to lose his hearing. He might have felt that if he kept playing, you know, he'd go totally deaf. I know he pulled me aside once at Pinewood, and he said, Jeff, you have to stop asking us to play live. I know you want to make the film, a certain way, and I know you're doing it for our fans and all that, but, to me, it's Pavlovian. It's, I'm like one of Pavlov's dogs. I get a taste of blood. I hit the stage. I taste that blood. I don't want to stop again. I have to stop myself from doing it before it happens. And then he did it anyway. I think everybody was in a bad mood. It started off on the wrong foot. To be honest, I don't remember. It was probably so traumatic I've blacked out on it. I know in the film there's only two little bits and pieces. There's the comment Pete makes about any loudmouth little git out there that wants to come take his guitar off of him and all that. So that was kind of the prevailing mood of the night. And then, there's a little clip in our final, closing credits where they come up into the dressing room and all start throwing things and slamming the door to the dressing room and so on. It was an unhappy experience. I remember that. And of course, a disaster for me. I mean, I'd been begging them to do this gig and they finally do it, and it's, it's an abortion. Trying to get the band together for a meeting. I mean, I think we have a representation of one of their meetings in the film, where they're all sitting around that table. Pete's talking about them becoming a circus act or whatever. I mean, the idea, can you imagine getting all of them in the room for like a board meeting or whatever? I mean, trying to, lobby them to do anything. I would definitely do it on an individual by individual basis. I would think I'd say, Pete, Keith, we'll do it if you do it. And then I say, Keith, Pete said he'd do it. And Roger, Pete and Keith said they'd do it. And John would always go along pretty much, I think, with the group decision. It was, again, probably some kind of manipulation, subtle. I had to get the job done. Again, I so desperately needed, the Who's Next footage, and to do some, new footage, show what the band was like at that particular point in time, and also to get something that we controlled the footage. It was so frustrating always editing other people's material. It wasn't an ego thing, it was more of a practical thing, like, God, I'd like to see more of the Ox, or, why isn't anybody ever on Keith for any of his fills, or, why can't anybody backlight Roger, so he looks like the rock god he is. And why is Pete's, all his shit always off camera, So I just wanted to have a go at it, I think, more than anything. I wanted to be more in control of the footage so we would get what we needed. They go on, they do a show, Bob O'Reilly, boom, it's great, opening number. Pete tries to decapitate me by throwing the tambourine at my head. Anyway, Won't Get Fooled Again, they do it, it's over. I thought, kind of just ends. John, who was watching this for the making of the DVD stuff, said they're actually having a coffee break or something on stage at the end of it. Anyway, I was like out of my mind thinking, oh my God, I finally got them to do Won't Get Fooled Again. And the end is lame. No other word for it. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to beg them to do it again. How am I going to do this? Anyway, I go backstage and I ask Keith first, because he was always an ally, and I said, Keith, I really need you guys to do Won't Get Fooled Again. And I promise I'll make you look like the God of Thunder, because he was like kind of, done it. It was over. I said, please, please. He said, I'll do it if Pete does it. So I go over to Pete. And I thought, oh my God, I'm doomed. He never goes back when he's done. But I thought, Pete, I need a definitive end for Won't Get Fooled Again. I need a definitive end for the movie. I just can't let it end like this. And he looks at me and goes, a definitive end? I mean, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to go out and fall asleep on stage while playing. Perhaps you'd like me to die doing my last solo. Or maybe I should hit that motherfucker over the head with me guitar who keeps yelling, "Magic Bus!" I thought, yeah, something like that. And they went out, and you see it as it ended. And, thank God they did it. So. One of the great moments of the experience of doing The Kids Right was the opening, the very first opening of the film in New York City. First of all, I was leaving the Plaza Hotel with my parents to see the movie, and Muhammad Ali was outside, so I got to shake his hand. There's like the champ, and I'm on the way to my movie. And it was at the Plaza Cinema on 58th Street, right off of Fifth Avenue. When we got to Fifth Avenue, there's a line around the block. And I thought, this can't possibly be for my movie, but it wasn't your typical Fifth Avenue crowd either. So I thought, oh my God, this kind of life form, they must be Who fans, And we walk around the block, and sure enough, it's the line for the movie all the way around the block. And I know we go inside. It's a mob scene outside. We go in, we're watching the movie, and I remember this like publicist or whatever from New World, the company that released the film, comes up and goes, Jeff, they're destroying the theater. There's all kinds of vandalism taking place. What should we do? What should we do? And I, even then I knew the right answer. Call the press. So apparently that night there was $15,000 within those days. It was a lot of money. $15,000 worth of damage to the theater. Somebody who had been turned away went to a nearby construction site and took some rebar and was whacking the marquee, actually busted up the theater marquee. They totally trashed the men's room, tearing out urinals, whatever. People were dancing on the proscenium, where the screen was. It was absolutely riotous. It was the way it should be. I thought, oh my God, maybe I made the right movie. I know one of my other favorite stories was, I know they held a projectionist hostage in Paramus, New Jersey, because he wasn't playing the film loud enough. There was a hostage situation. It got very tribal. It was always meant to be an audience participation film, so I think I succeeded in that. I think it's still an audience participation film.
What happened in London?
And now you can watch it in the comfort of your own home.
And wreck your own home.
Yeah, right. I was going to say, kids, don't try this at home, but try it at home. Well, again, I mean, when you work with people, under those kind of circumstances, all the craziness, what was going on in the band and what was going on in music with the punk movement and what was going on in England with all the politics and the turmoil. And just any time, one is in the middle of a project of this enormity, whether it's a film or a record, I suppose, or anything, you're always going to go through a lot of changes, and your relationships are going to evolve, when you get to know your idols. I mean, this is what Pete warned me about. Sometimes when you can, look behind the public persona, there might be, things that are best kept hidden. Do you know what I mean? But I never ended up hating The Who. It's ridiculous. I mean, even though he warned me of that, I feel kind of at the end of the thing, I thought I had done my job. I was pleased I did it. More than anything, I was pleased I survived. But I certainly didn't hate them. I'm a Who fan to this day. I still fly the flag, I'm not ashamed. I think I felt more like the monument on the cover of Who's Next.